Hey folks, in this video we'll be tackling the first Spill the DBT challenge. So DBT is a great skill to learn. It greatly improves what you can do in SQL by giving you Python, by giving you Ginger, a document language, and baking in some data engineering principles along with that. Throughout the challenges we'll be diving into different functionality of DBT so you can go and learn and explore different things about the tool. For this first challenge, it's really an introduction to DBT. So we'll be taking a normal SQL script that we know works. We'll be then migrating that to DBT. Then we'll be adding in some DBT functionalities with that. So we'll be modularizing the code, we'll be adding tests, and then we'll be documenting our work. If at any point in this video you find that your code's not working, for example, it's not using the right version of Python or it doesn't know what DBT is, please refer to this installation guide I have for DBT Core. This should give you all the necessary ingredients to complete these challenges. For each challenge, you get a list of instructions and steps of what to do. For these videos, I will just be walking through these steps in case you want to check something, maybe you got stuck somewhere, I will be here to help. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing you're going to want to do is fork this GitHub repo. Now, if you haven't used GitHub much in the past, that might be completely new words. You might be asking, what do I want? So what I mean is go over here and hit fork. This will go and create your own copy of Spill the DBT. So go over to you as the owner. You will then get a repository on your GitHub profile called Spill the DBT. That will then pass you on all the code and everything from this project to your own GitHub account that you can then work through from there. And the nice thing about this is if I add any more challenges to this GitHub repository, you can actually go and sync those changes over to your own project. So you can keep working on the challenges, and if I add more, you can just add those to your own project. Okay, so go ahead, choose your owner, and then hit down here and hit create fork. After you do that, it should look something like this, but just on your own profile. So this should have your username here, /spillthedbt. Okay, so how do you get this code onto your machine? So there are some options under here. If you use the command line, you can actually go and call GitHub, clone that repository down that you've made, or you can open it in GitHub Desktop, or even just download the content straight to your machine. However, if you're using VS Code, there is an option here. So in VS Code, you actually have this option on the side for source control. You can actually go and clone the repository from here. So all you need to do is to take the URL from GitHub, and that will clone the content to your local machine. Okay, so your screen on VS Code should look like this. All you need to do is navigate to where you downloaded the repository to. Now, the first thing you want to do here is come over to source control. You want to go and create a branch. So we're going to give this branch a name. I'm going to call this challenge 1. So adding a branch here means that I can work through this challenge in isolation. I'm not going to be affecting anything on the main branch where all the other code lives. So I can work on this safe in the knowledge that if anything goes wrong, I can always go back to the main branch. That will be safe. And when I finish this challenge, I can go and bring this code over to the main branch to share my solution. Similarly, if you've been using GitHub Desktop, you can use this as well to go and create a branch here. So this is just the same thing. I've gone and created a branch here. Publish branch will means that branch will be available for people to see on github.com. They will just need to go and look for that specific branch. Okay, so we're starting a new project. So the first thing we want to do is to set up a virtual environment for DBT. So to create my virtual environment, I want to call venv. So this is Python calling venv, making an environment called dbt environment. Okay, so my environment has been made. You can see here dbt env is created. You can also see that I now have over 800 different pending changes to my account. What you need to do is actually go and add this folder to your git ignore. So under git ignore, okay, so I've added dbt env to my git ignore. What this does is Gray's out, dbt env. This is not going to be considered or tracked for changes. And now I only have one change going over to GitHub, which is going to be modifying this gitignore file. Okay, so we made an environment now. We need to go and activate it. As I'm on a Windows machine, I'm going to be using this path. If you are on Mac or Linux, it's slightly different. Essentially, we're going into our environment, into scripts, and going to be using one of these activate commands. It's worked. You can actually see dbt env has come up here at the start, meaning I'm using this environment. Okay, so we've created this environment. Now we need to go and install dbt all the requirements that we're going to need for this project, which are all kept under here under requirements. So let's go and install these. Okay, so I use the command pip install r-requirements.txt. What this will do is read through that requirements file and install the packages being listed here. Okay, so it takes a while, but that's all the packages we need for this project installed. And you can always verify this by looking under your environment. Under scripts, you can see we've got a lot more than what we had before. We even got dbt itself as an executable. Okay, so I'm going to clear my screen with CLS. So it goes and clears all that previous code. Now what we need to do is to initialize a dbt project and to give that project a name. So I'm going to call this challenge 1 because that's the challenge we're tackling. So dbt init challenge 1. Okay, so dbt has initialized. You can see actually it has made a challenge 1 up here. For me, it has come up saying that a profile called challenge 1 already exists on my profiles page. Do I want to overwrite it? And I'll say yes, so you can all follow along with me. Now you should have this question of what database would you like to use. In this case, DuckDB. DuckDB is the adapter we installed as part of this, so I'm going to use DuckDB. That's the database we'll be using for these challenges. So I enter 1, and that's done. Okay, so I've now made my dbt project. I can now go and change my directory on this path to challenge 1, which means just diving into this folder. In here, this is your dbt project. This is where you'll find the places to actually go and set up and run dbt from. This itself could be an entire repository on its own, but we'll keep it like this and we'll run things from that folder itself. Okay, so we've got the project set up. What we need to do is to move over some of the content that came with this challenge. So under requirements, you'll find the data associated with this challenge. So we have a SQL script, we have a database. This is a DuckDB database, so it comes as a file, which is kind of cool. And you'll have a Python file to go and read the database. So what we can do is we can go and copy this folder into our challenge folder, so challenge 1. And now we can just verify that we can read this database. So I use my Python command to read that database, that file, which should connect to that Lego DB. Okay, so if you want to take a look at this file, what this does is it will go and connect to this Lego database file. It will then show you all the tables that we have. So these are all the table names there. And then it will also go and run the SQL script that I provided too. So we can see that that SQL script actually comes back, gives us some answers back. We can also take a look at the SQL script too. So this SQL script is about finding different Lego sets and understanding which sets have unique parts associated with them. If you think of Lego from a business perspective, they make different parts that go into sets that you build like the kit out of. Of those parts that you get in your Lego box, how many of them are unique to that set? Like they're not available in any other box out there. There's going to be an additional cost if they're not going to be able to reuse different parts. Understanding this could be quite an important metric for the business. Okay, so if you're using dbeaver as your SQL client, you can actually go and connect to this DuckDB file as well. All you need to do is go hit the plug sign. This will create a new connection. You can find DuckDB. Hit next. All you'll need to do is go and open this file. And then I can hit finish. Okay, so if you've got that set up, you might need to install a driver, but that should be straightforward. You can now go into your Lego DB. Under main, under tables, you'll get all those tables there. And so here you can actually go and run the SQL script that we've got with the challenge and see how that works. And you can see I get those results back as I did with Python. Okay, so we've got the script. We know it works. Now let's get it into dbt. And the first place we need to come is the profiles.yml file. Okay, so if you come to this file path, so on Windows, I'm on the C drive, I'm under users, my username, and then I've found a folder called .dbt. There is a YAML file here called profiles. If you go and open this up, okay, you might have the same stuff here as me, you might have something different, but I can see I've got a lot of different connection profiles. Like I've got 2 for challenge 1 here, that's not going to help. So in the challenge markdown file, I've given you the connection profile you need for challenge 1. What you can do is you can get rid of everything here and then paste in that challenge target. So what this is going to do is it's going to go and find that file path for that Lego database, knowing there's a type of DuckDB. Okay, so we can save this now. So now this will allow dbt to go and find this Lego database for us and run SQL against it. Okay, now we set up the profile. What we need to do is set up a model to go and run this SQL script. So under models, you have the example model. What we want is to set up a new folder, and I'm going to call this Lego. This will be my Lego model. So I'm going to add a folder here, call it Lego. And then what I need to do is to move this SQL script to this folder. So I'm going to go here, just going to go copy and paste that into there. Now, one thing of note, when you run this model, the table it creates will be called this. So it's good practice to name these things what you want them to be called. In this case, I'm just going to call this file Lego, as I want that the table name to be called that. Okay, now to get this project to be run, I need to go and add it to the dbt project YAML file. If you scroll down in your dbt project YAML file, you'll come to this section here where it defines what happens with the models. So in this case, example, so anything that is created running that model will be materialized as a view by default. This can be overwritten in the individual SQL scripts, but more on that later. So for my project, what I need to do is go and add another line in for Lego and then to say how I want those results to be materialized. Okay, so I can just copy and paste this over what I had already. I know I don't want to run the example model. In fact, you can just delete it from this dbt project here. And what this will do is then go and read anything in that Lego folder and then write it as a table. And I'll be writing it to the DuckDB file that we connected to earlier. Okay, so if I save this, let's get back to terminal and let's see if this project works. Okay, so if you do dbt run, that will run all the models. What I'm doing here is using the shorthand to select the specific model, which is Lego in this case. So I'm going to run that. So we can see the model ran, but it ended up with an error. I'm going to see here, syntax error at or near semicolon. Now earlier we tested that our SQL script could work. So we know the SQL works. So what's going on? Why doesn't this work in dbt? So what we can do is actually go and investigate this by looking in the target folder. In targets, you'll have compiled and you'll have run. So this is the SQL code that will be run against the database. So if you are having issues understanding where an error is, this is a good place to come. So you can see what's been compiled, and this will be the Lego SQL script that we passed earlier. So this should be the same as always. Best place to look is under run. So this is what's actually run by dbt. So here we can see that it's trying to create a table with unique parts, blah, blah, blah. That all looks good. So I can see actually semicolon that indicates the end of a query. I've got this twice now. What has happened is when it's creating the table, it has wrapped my query that I've given it in brackets, and then at the end it's given it a semicolon. So me adding a semicolon to this script has caused an issue. So to fix this issue, we need to go back to our original Lego script. Let's go down here. And so we know that this code is going to be injected into our create table statement between 2 brackets, and then it's going to end in a semicolon. So effectively, we don't need a semicolon here. So if I delete that, save the file, and let's rerun the model and see if that works. Okay, so there we go. Completed successfully, 1 of 1, okay. So that we know that works, that's good. Okay, so now we've got our SQL script running in dbt. Let's go and add in some elements of dbt to help improve the SQL script, help improve our processes, and really get good value from dbt. So one way we can really improve our processes here is by adding tests to this SQL script. So one of the things I did when I made this was I assumed that all the results that would come out of this would have values associated with them. So for example, like the report here gives a theme name, sets, and year. I assume none of those would be null. What I can do with dbt is I can test for that and make sure that those values aren't being included in my final report. You must have had it where you have a stakeholder and they say, what's this null? What does this mean? And really it shouldn't be there in the first place. Okay, so to add tests for this model, what we can do is add a schema.yml file here and define some tests against this model. To check there's no nulls in my columns, I'm going to use these out-of-the-box data tests for not null. What I need to do is just go and change this column name for my specific columns of theme, set name, and set year. Okay, so I've gone and added my different tests for my different column names. One thing to note here is that just make sure you're being careful with the indentation that happens. So for example, name starts on the same line as data tests. You might also see some people write this as just tests, which is okay. That is the older version. There's now newer migration to data tests as the word to define tests. Here what I need to do is just check that these tests run. So I'm going to run dbt test on my Lego model. Okay, so the 3 tests have been run and all came back successful. That is good. Okay, so next up we're going to start modularizing this code. So what I mean by this is taking this SQL script and breaking up into different parts. So effectively we can run this common table expression at the top, we can run that separate, and then run the query that follows afterwards. Okay, so let's do that. Let's go and make a SQL query for unique parts, and then we'll go and get that SQL result referenced by this query here. Okay, so I'm going to make a new file and call it unique parts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go and take my SQL query here, copy that, paste that in there. Okay, so what the plan is, I want my unique parts SQL script to run first. I want that to be created as a table. I can then use that table in this query here. So effectively, I won't need the common table expression anymore. That's okay. But I've still got the reference to unique parts. So what I need to do is replace that with the table that will be created. And to do that, I will use a bit of Ginger and the ref function. So here I've used Ginger, which is 2 curly brackets. I've used ref to then define unique parts. Ref here indicates that this query depends on unique parts. So unique parts will be run first and then my Lego SQL script. Okay, now let's go and test that works by running dbt run again. Okay, so I can see there on the terminal I've run it. So you can see here when I made unique parts first and then went on to make my main table called Lego. So finished running 2 models, all done, all good. Okay, so one of the good things I can do now is I can actually go and generate some documentation for the work I've done. Now typically this would be a manual process and is likely to become outdated pretty quickly, but this is a nice benefit of dbt is that you can actually go and generate documentation dynamically. So what I need to do is run 2 commands. So dbt docs generate will build out the documentation. Okay, so there we go. We can see that it's written a catalog and I've got a JSON file there. Now what I'm going to do is actually go and serve that up as a static website. So dbt docs serve. And so over on my webpage, it's gone and it's made a little website for me. Okay, so if this website doesn't pop up, it's usually on localhost 8080. So here, and I can actually go and start looking around the project. So I can go into projects, I can go into models, and I can find Lego. And I can actually go and see these different models. So I can tap into Lego, and I can see some of the details around this project. Now, of course, this isn't going to be very filled out because there's a lot more information you can populate as part of your dbt project to populate this documentation. One thing here that we want to look at is what this model depends on, so what this table needs. So we can see, yes, this the table needs unique parts, and that's because we added that ref function in our SQL script. We can also then see the actual code itself that's being used. So this can be super helpful to navigate around the different code you've got on your code base. And I'm just going to hit Control C to exit out of that. Okay, so we've migrated our SQL script, we've built some tests, we've modularized it out, and now let's just go and build everything. So in this case, we run a command dbt build that will go and do dbt run and dbt test. So similar syntax before, just dbt build instead of test or run. But in fact, it will be doing both. So there you go, you can see it builds out those two tables and then it runs the test against that Lego table at the end. So I can see 5 of 5 have been passed, so that's all good. And lastly, I can actually go and check back on my database to see that that table has been created. For this, I can use the read database query we had before. And yes, I can see, hey, I've now got a table called unique parts come up. I've also got a table called Lego come up. So those have been written to my database. Okay, so we're in a good place. We've basically completed the challenge. All you need to do now is just commit your work to GitHub so you can show people that you've completed this project, that you know a bit about dbt. So there's a few ways of doing this. In VS Code, you already have the source control here. So you can come here, you can enter your commit message, say challenge completed. You could also come to the terminal here and enter a commit statement like this, so git commit challenge completed. Or if you're using GitHub Desktop, you can come here, you can then go and enter your summary of your commit message down here of challenge completed, and then go and commit that branch. So however which way you do it, just make sure you commit, yes. So now I've staged those changes. What I need to do now is actually go and publish this branch so people can go and see it on github.com. So on your repository for Spill the DBT, so this will be your username, not mine, you should now see that this branch has come through, and you get the option here, compare and pull request. If you don't see that, check under branches. There should be at least 2 for this branch you've created. If you click this, you should see your challenge here. And here you'll be able to do the pull request this way. But what you want to do, compare and pull request. So this is going to port the code that you've created, the dbt project you've built, over to the main branch. That means it's available for everyone to see the work you've done. So you can write a description, create a pull request. You will then accept it because you are the author of your own repository, and that way that work can be shared. And while you're there on GitHub, feel free to update this README to actually show the challenges you completed. Make it really easy for any future employers to see the work you've done, the skills you know in dbt. So for a hint at the bottom here, I've given you a few skills that have been tested. You may want to put in little sample bits of code or bits where you found those errors. So where we were looking into the targets thing and saw that like the actual compiled SQL query had 2 semicolons. That's a good tip to know. And as we do more of these challenges, you'll have more skills to then show as this repository as part of your portfolio. And that is all for me. I hope you've enjoyed this challenge. I hope you've learned something. Join me back for the next challenge where we move on to doing a bit more with testing in dbt. Bye.